Say hi.
Hello. Nothing's free.
Oh, I mean, maybe some PR thing. SPR. Salesforce is
But nothing like that.
nothing like
This
this.
is pretty much.
C'est toi qui m'as posé cette question. Sur LinkedIn, il y a quelqu'un qui m'a posé la même question.
Je vais la mettre là, si tu veux.
Ah ouais,
Là. Petit truc là, ça. Ça va prendre un peu de temps quand même. Là, je t'appelle.
Ah bah du coup, regarde, ça il y a... Non.
Bienvenue, bonsoir. Bonsoir à l'événement de la French Tech. Donc j'ai le plaisir de faire l'accueil. Je m'appelle Alex Dayon and I'm going to switch in English as I was told. So welcome everybody for the French Tech event tonight in San Francisco. I'm Alex Dayon and I'm President and Chief Strategy Officer at Salesforce. And I have the pleasure to welcome the French Tech for the very first time, and I hope it won't be the last time, to the Salesforce Tower. So welcome. And there is something very special about that floor. So before we start our event, we have an amazing program tonight about something that is really dear to our art at Salesforce, but also dear to our art with the French community here in San Francisco, which is diversity. Before we go there and we explain why we've been working on that event and that theme, I'd love to orient everybody about the place, because you can see it's pretty magical to be here tonight and enjoy the view. We also did the setup, so we have a direct view on the French consulate, which is somewhere around here. So Emmanuel, our consul, who's in the room right here, you can see we have a view of the beautiful consulate in Twin Peaks. And we just opened those two floors, 60 and 61st, a couple of weeks ago. They are called Ohana floors. Ohana stands for family in Hawaiian. And it's a reflection of the Salesforce culture, which is those floors are not for the C-suite or the CEO or the management team who are in their little office. Those floors are actually communal space. They are for you, they are for everybody. Everybody is welcome here on those Ohana floors. And the purpose of those floors is really to be a place of exchange, a place of ideation, and a place of connection. So that's obviously very important for us, because tonight is a good example where we are all part of the same community, and at Salesforce we value those connections. So that's the reason why we built that floor this way. And you should really feel free if you have projects, ideas, non-profits, that you really want to put on the scene, let us know, because as you know, those floors are also available for the non-profit in San Francisco at no cost. So it's a very important part of our mission. And before we go into tonight's event, the last thing I wanted to share, it's really about a couple of words about Salesforce. I mean, we have obviously this big, massive tower that you see from afar, from pretty much everywhere. We are inside, so we don't see now the artwork that is on top of the tower, which is part of the San Francisco. I think my mic is going up and down. I hope you guys can hear me. So we have this big artwork on top of the building by an artist called Jim Campbell, who has also tons of super fun artwork at the SF MoMA, which I encourage everybody to go and see. We don't control it, because very often I have people calling me, say, oh, we'd love to put some stuff there. I say, well, Mark Benioff has zero control of this artwork. It's part of the city program on promoting art. And when you build a building, now you need to spend some amount of money on art, which is great. And we have basically this huge video screen on top, which is most of the time showing scenes of the life in San Francisco. Now, inside the building, there is something important, which is obviously Salesforce occupies a big part of the building. And Salesforce was really built, it's a 20-year-old company now. This year it'll be about 13 billion in revenues. It's a big company. It's the largest employer in the city of San Francisco. But what's more important is the value on which Mark Benioff and the rest of the management team build the company. And Salesforce is built on 4 values. The first one is trust. And it's very important for us when we build a building that the building reflects those values. So it's very important for us to share why you're experiencing what you're experiencing in this floor or the other floors of the building. Trust. Trust is because the core of our business, cloud computing, is to host our customer data. They need to be secure, they need to be protected, they need to be available. And we believe that the number one reason to be trusted is to be transparent about everything you're doing. So if you're an employee at Salesforce, there is a huge amount of transparency in the building. There is no closed office. The management sits on the floor like everybody else. All the meeting rooms have windows. I mean, it's a very, very transparent culture. The second element in the culture is customer success. You see, for example, around you, when we put posters on the wall, it's not about us. It's not about Salesforce. It's about T-Mobile. It's about American Red Cross. It's about Morgan Stanley. It's about our customers. It's not about us. And that's a very important part of the culture, which is the only reason why we've been successful is about those customers, and the whole organization works around that. The third value, we went for trust, customer success, is innovation. Obviously, we are a tech company. We're here to bring innovation to our customers. We're here to basically hide the complexity of the technology for those customers and let them run their big dreams. So we are a high-tech company. We always push the limit to the next level. That's the most exciting part of why we're all here. Now, the fourth value, and that's why we're here tonight, at Salesforce, is equality. And we have an office of equality at Salesforce. We have a chief equality officer. I'm the chief strategy officer, there's a chief product officer, there's a chief financial officer, and there is an office of equality. There's a chief equality officer. And actually tonight, I want really to thank Marcus, you're here, so maybe you can identify yourself. You work for Tony, our Chief Equality Officer, and Marcus is actually gracious enough to have organized tonight's event, so thank you for you and the team for the great work. Because equality is something that we kind of, being French, share. As you know, in France, it's on every government building, liberté, égalité, fraternité, so equality has a central place in our buildings, in our culture since the revolution. But we live in a world where things are changing very fast. We're living in a world where technology is taking over. Technology is creating massive disruptions in everybody's life, the way we live, but also the way the wealth is distributed. And there is an amazing concentration of wealth right now in the tech industry. There is things that are changing at the political level due to technology. And if you don't really put equality in the heart of everything you're doing, in terms of giving access to those new jobs, in terms of making sure you operate on equal footing within your enterprise, then you have a problem. And that's very important for us, that it's as basically important on our values. There's only 4 values at Salesforce that have been really consistent over the years. It's great to have success, but it's also very important to create a more equal world. And that's why tonight we wanted to make sure that we play a role with the French community, because this is an important topic. It's a complex topic, as we know, we all know, and I think the news have shown it's still very, very difficult to have discussion around those topics. So we felt tonight was a special time for the French tech to also have an opportunity to discuss around those themes. So I want to thank you for joining tonight. I'm also super happy to see that we have a very diverse group of people tonight, so it's very exciting for us. And I want to thank Reza for the hard work he put and the energy in managing and getting the energy with the French tech in San Francisco at the right level. So thank you, Reza, for everything, and welcome tonight.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much, Alex. So first, I want to thank Alex for having hosted us. I don't know if you know, but this is actually the first public event on top of the tower. So you guys like super privileged. And I also want to thank Christine, June, and the others in Marcus's team who have helped us greatly to put this together and welcome us while construction is actually not finished. They've pulled a lot of things together to make sure that we could be here. So thank you everyone for that. So what I wanted to kick off the event with, Alex, is you talked about the values for Salesforce and why this matters to you guys, and I really commend you for that. But
it's a first event, so see the wireless system is still working. It's magic.
But the first thing I wanted to ask you is, beyond Salesforce, when you and I talked about this, you mentioned about your personal experience and what makes diversity important to you. So I was hoping that you could maybe touch a little bit on that and say why is this topic so important to you and what it means to you.
Well, that's obviously a deep personal question. I think that, first I would say, like everybody, we all have, I would say half of this room have experienced immigration and moving to a new culture, a new country, a new way of thinking, and sometimes not being kind of in your comfort zone. And I think when you move outside your comfort zone, when you meet new cultures, when you meet new people, new ways of thinking, actually it's hard, but you get the best out of yourself. You pass at some point a peak and you realize that diversity is actually an asset. It's not easy. It's not easy to go outside your comfort zone. Also, obviously, on my personal level, my family is a diverse family, so I've had the pleasure to also embrace different cultures, and I think it's an important aspect of your life that's you don't really learn at school. I think that's the big challenge about the topic we're going to discuss tonight. In a weird way, I've been myself through the kind of the standard French education system, which is free, so it's great from an equality standpoint, but it's very formatted. And I don't think it really creates a very diverse world in terms of thinking. It's kind of one-fits-all process, and you really step into your diversity world when you embrace the outside world. And for me, when I basically went through a Grandes Écoles in France, and the first thing I wanted to do was to create a startup. I went through an école called Supélec, and I wanted to create a startup in tech. It was in '89, and I met 2 other guys who basically were working at Oracle, who also wanted to create a startup, and we started a company called Business Subjects, which in '89 was a kind of a crazy idea. It became the first publicly listed company in '94. We did an IPO on NASDAQ, which I can tell you in '94, no one had a clue what an IPO was. When I was telling my friends, we're going for an IPO, I was like, well, what it is. It really took 10 years to really become kind of something more mainstream. But all along, I realized that being outside the comfort zone, being outside, and when you go on a startup and you are in '89, most of my friends were going to big companies, more formatted path, more organized. Well, when you go outside I would say the beaten path, and you have to embrace diversity. You have to embrace new ways of thinking. You have to embrace new ways of thinking, different people, different cultures, different personalities, and you kind of spend way more time realizing the value in every human being instead of staying in that kind of your comfort zone or you basically what the social codes have been built for you. And I think that's the magic of being in San Francisco, It's a place of ultimate diversity. Now with a lot of social challenge, and we're very vocal about it. But I think there is probably no better place than being in San Francisco to discuss about diversity, because the tech industry is a model of immigration. There's still some challenge in diversity, and we're going to talk about it tonight, because we know we have still some big challenge, in particular in terms of gender diversity, both in terms of gender pay gap, in terms of ratios in companies. But the tech industry has been basically built by bringing a lot of different ways of thinking and a lot of different people from around the world.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, I hear a lot of comments and points of view around these cultural aspects, this equality aspect, and this notion of trying to do what's good. But there's also a lot of arguments that actually say it actually makes sense from a business perspective. And if you're just thinking as a business leader, then you should embrace diversity. And you guys have been doing it for a while here. And so maybe you can now put kind of your chief strategy hat on and comment a little bit about what it means for your business at Salesforce and why you guys embrace it from that perspective.
Well, first, there is many studies, even without the Salesforce ad, there is many studies, and I was actually reading one today about the future of work, that shows that a diverse workplace, starting with gender diversity, but that's very kind of the starting point, gender diversity. There's obviously many other forms of diversity you need to promote. Companies who have a diverse workforce are actually way more performant than companies who don't. And I think it's even aggravated right now by the fact that we're living in times of change. We're living in times that the World Economic Forum called the fourth industrial revolution, where the tech is changing everything, whether it's AI, it's IoT, it's 3D printing. I mean, every industry, and I'm living that every day. I'm meeting in my new job. For the past year, I've been doing strategy for Salesforce. I spent a lot of time with CEOs of big and mid-sized companies to understand their own strategy. And the world is changing at a pace we've never seen. And whether you're running an insurance company, a bank, a car manufacturer, every industry is going up completely upside down. When you're going through those times of change, if you don't open your mind about different ways of thinking, about a diverse workplace, about really embracing people, and you keep on protecting kind of the old way of operating, you can't transform your company, you can't perform, it's impossible. You need to get outside your comfort zone, because very often the resistance to diversity is the comfort zone. People hire people who look like them, who think like them, who basically behave like them, who've been to the same school. I mean, we've seen some example recently in the politics. In fact, you're way more better when you bring people who really are different, and you don't feel like comfortable because it's kind of not where you operate yourself, but they're going to bring you to the next level. And I think for me, I think that we're living in times of change, fourth industrial revolution. Every business, every industry, every company needs to reinvent itself. We see that every day. And diversity is clearly an element of performance. The second element of that is obviously not only the way you think, but also you need to attract the best people, the best talents. And the best talents are diverse. And you need to retain those talents. And I can tell you at Salesforce, we've been for many years the #1 place to work here in the US, in France, so both in France and US, but many other countries, Canada, Singapore. In all those countries, we are the best place to work. And when you run employee surveys, it's not about the compensation. Actually, the #1 reason why people work at Salesforce and stay at Salesforce is actually about two things: diversity and philanthropy. Because we have a very active philanthropy program. We pay our employees 6 days a year to do whatever they want. It's called VTO, volunteering time off. Like you have PTO, personal time off. So you basically do whatever you want to help a non-profit organization. But also we're very active in terms of making sure we solve the pay gap. We do have, for example, a gender pay gap every year. Every year, at the end of the year, I don't know if you have people working for the employee success team in the room, but every year our HR organization is called Employee Success at Salesforce. Every year we run the computer and we check if there is a pay gap between men and women. Every year there is one. Why? I don't know. We don't know. We try to understand, but every year it kind of recreates itself. It's not huge, but it recreates itself. And every year, Mark basically just neutralize that and put money on the table to re-equalize compensation between men and women. So we constantly making sure that this is on top of mind for us. And this is a huge argument for retaining the best talent in the industry. And as you know, this place is a place of competition for talent. So being diverse is clearly a winning argument.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alex. We're a little pressed for time, so Alex promised that he's going to stay around. He'll be by the bar for questions during the networking time, so you can grab it.
That's why I love that the French Tech Euros is a great French wise. So thank you, Reza, for organizing. Plus, we have a fantastic set of speakers tonight.
Yes.
Thank you, Laurence, for joining. But also, we have an amazing panel. So clearly, a great job, Reza, for tonight. And
Thank you, Alex.
It's yours.
Thank you for having me. So, I'm sorry. Now I'd like to welcome Laurence Engel to come and join me here. Laurence is the head of the French National Library. So it's actually the first time there's a woman head of the library, and we're very fortunate to have her visiting San Francisco. We told her that she would get a unique view, and so she kind of made her trip last longer and then was able to join us here. So Laurence, thank you for joining us. The Bibliothèque Nationale de France, the French National Library, is basically turning from a physical goods environment into more and more of a digital environment. And how are women dealing with that, and how is the gender equality happening in your organization?
Good evening, first of all. The BNF does with equality between men and women exactly at the same level as other institutions, so it's not so good. Comparing, if I think of what it was told just before, it seems that the benefit is just at the opposite of all of you here. We are not a startup, I can't say that. We are not a very little and very young institution. It's exactly the contrary. We are very old. It's around more than 500 years, so it's a long story. And I usually say that our institution, I try to prove it, was innovative since the beginning of its story with the invention of a bigger deposit. And that's right, that it's really a spirit to be, to try to keep open to ideas. And because it's an old institution, and because it's a cultural institution and a heritage institution, there are a lot of women inside the institution. So the majority of the staff are women, more than the majority, around 56%. But when we are looking at the management, at the top management, it's the reverse percentage, so it's not so good. It's exactly the same thing as everywhere, unless the very top management, because as you have told, I'm the first lady at the presidency of the institution. It doesn't work. But yes, thank you. But it was interesting for me to say that we also are a digital institution. That's true for a long time now, because we began to deal with digitization and everything digital 20 years ago. And in that field, women are quite good. And it's good never, because it's always said that in some sectors, in some fields, women are very numerous, so it's the case in the cultural field, and it's not a good news, because when women are more numerous than men, it's because it's something less important sometimes. And in the technical field, women are usually less numerous. And in the BNF, for instance, the Department of Metadonnées, of metadata, is managed by a woman. The deputy manager for all the very big direction of services and network is a woman too. And before coming here, I checked with a list of the 10 very new project we have in digital subjects, and 4 above 10 are women. We manage that project, so it's not so bad, and maybe it's a way to have more women in technology subject, to mix technology and something else. So it's something very important. And so what happened in that institution is that if we don't decide to do things, they don't come along. And so we are not so good to deal with that question.
Okay, thank you. So it's great to see that there was progress, and you mentioned that you're trying to do that. And I'm assuming that if we go back and ask you more of a personal question, kind of the same way I asked Alex, the question of equality between men and women in your own personal career has been an important one. You've reached a point today where you are the first woman at the head of the National Library. But maybe if you could touch on a little bit all the things that went through your career, the things that you found important and that marked the different steps of the career, that'll be great.
So, to speak about testimony, I think that I had the same experience than a large number of women. It's not necessarily a frontal experience of explaining you are a woman, so you can't do this or that. It's more ambiguous, and always more ambiguous. So if I can give some examples, the first question is the question of children. And so I began my professional life in the Cour des Comptes, in the account court in France, so it's a very prestigious, yes, but paisible. It's not easy, but I mean, it's very. We don't work in a hurry every day. It's something very calm, and there is no organization. There is no hierarchical organization. So if you don't here because you are pregnant and you have to leave some weeks your job, it's not really a problem. There is no money questions, no profit questions, but when I were pregnant for the second time, they just tell me, oh, one more time. So it's something very, it was not hard, it was not, but it was strange. It was strange just to hear that. And so all along my career, I received this kind of little ambiguous notations that are not so easy to receive. And another thing I think really very different when I reached some more high-level positions. When you are a chief, you manage as a chief, you make decisions. And so I always receive the mention that if you just say no, and if you are a woman, it's because you are too autoritaire, too tough, yes. And when you are, and really it's really hard to hear that. When you are a man, you manage to be a man, and it's a good thing. When you are a woman, nobody can understand you say no. And really, it's something very ambiguous for one more time. It's not general, but you just feel that, and it's really, it's a bad thing. So you have thought that I were the first woman at the top management of this very old institution, and everybody just it was noticed in by the ministry itself. The minister was so proud to have the first woman at that place, and it was really not a good novel for me. Everybody asked me, so you are very proud to be the first woman at that place. Yes, I'm proud to be there, but I'm not proud to be the first woman, because it was in 2016, and near my office, I have a gallery of all the photographs, prints, of course, not only photographs, but prints, and so for 500 years, and they are all men, and it's not, we don't have to be proud of that. So my answer were always, it will be a good thing when nobody will ask the question. So it is a question, so it's not a good news.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, as soon as it becomes common, then no one will notice anymore, and that would be pretty important.
Yeah.
So I think when you and I spoke preparing this, you mentioned that throughout your career you had learned a number of things that were important for you about what equality and gender diversity was about. So maybe if you could share these with the crowd, or what are the things that you learned around the time in these different environments you were?
Yes, I think, is it work? Yes. I worked for the government when there were the first law about equality between men and women. So it was in 2000. It was the first law about equality in elections. And at the beginning, I were quite against this. We all speak about the liberté, égalité, fraternité. In France, we used to think that everything is written in laws or in this sentence, and that we don't have to do anything more. We don't, and I didn't think that positive actions should be good, because it's always a way to say, you are here because you are a woman, so we are always afraid of that. But I had to say that without that law, nothing will have happened. So the first thing is that from that moment, I discovered that we need laws to enforce things. And without that, nothing just happened. It was something new for me. But on the other hand, I worked for 10 years with the mayor of Paris, Bertrand Delanoë, and he was exactly the same as we are here. He just wanted to have equality in his teams and at each level. That is really very important. Not only the level that is visible, but at each level. And 10 years afterwards, it was just natural. At each meeting, you have always the same number, or quite the same number, of men or women. And it became natural. But he wanted this, and he forces everybody to think about that. If you have a man in your team, you have to choose a woman near him to reach the equality. And then I came back to work for the government. I was director of the cabinet of the Minister of Culture, and when I arrived for the first meeting of all cabinet directors, I was the only woman. And so it was so surprising because during 10 years I had this equality, and it was a good thing. So laws and willing, and it's the only things that works. And so I think I always think about that, because we always have to do that. And there is, I am in the BNF for 2 years, and we don't reach this equality yet. So it's really hard to think about that, and at each level. So for 2 years, I asked people, for example, to have, as you have here, a panel when we have a conference, to try to have both men and women on the stage. And they just don't manage to do that. So each time I have to say, look at this, there are only men. Maybe there is a woman who can speak about history. Don't you think that there are one woman in the philosophy department? So I decided to say, if you propose to me something with not the equality, just don't show me. We don't have a choice not to force things if we want to achieve what we want.
Great, thank you very much, Laurence. Thank you very much for taking the time to coming and speaking with us. She's going to be around as well, so you can also ask her questions. With that, and I'm assuming you'll be near Alex by the bar as well?
Yeah.
So with that said, I'd like to welcome Julie Abrams. She's the CEO and chair of How Women Lead, and Julie has put together a panel for the next step of the conversation here. So welcome, Julie, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I asked my daughter if I should say I'm 17% French. Does that count? And she said, yeah. It's like saying I have that one black friend, you know, the good one. So I just want to invite the rest of the panel up here. We have a terrific group of people. Come on up, you guys. Please join us. A terrific group of people, and we feel like we want to go pretty quickly, right? So I've asked them to answer a question, but first I want to make sure, because one person said they didn't know what I was talking about. Who here knows what a glass ceiling is? All right, good. Okay, we got it. Okay, so this is the question. What's your name, your company, and what glass ceiling are you trying to break today?
Sure. Hi, David Chun. I'm the CEO and founder of Equilar. We're down in Robin City. We track data on executives and board members. And what I'm working on, and us as a company, is to increase diversity in boardrooms. And that's including not only women, but people of color. So any type of diversity.
And I'm Nicole, I'm the black friend. My name is Nicole Kiner, and I am in charge of search at the board list. And the board list is very related to Equilar's mission. We are focused on increasing the number of women specifically on boards, whether they be women of color or not. But that is our absolute focus, and so I spend all day, every day, working on that glass ceiling.
Hi. Does this work? Hi, my name is Laurence Goddard. I'm a director of pricing product at PayPal, and I'm volunteering at the Women Initiative Foundation, where I lead the West Coast operations. And one glass ceiling I'm very interested in breaking is for all women, is for women to be more present in AI. I think it will need to be there to build a future and not live in a future that's going to be created by only men. Right.
Hi, my name is Sylvain Kalash. I was the one who didn't know what was glass ceiling.
I thought it was a French thing, I didn't know.
Yes, I've learned something today. I'm the co-founder of Alberton School, and what we are trying to achieve is to provide high-quality education for the many. And we started with a 2-year program alternative to college, training software engineer. There is a lot of things that makes this our program different, but the first thing is that it's free, completely free to students until they find a job, and they only pay if they find a job with a percentage of their salary. The second thing is that there is no prior knowledge required, and our admission process is completely blind and automated. So we don't care about how old you are, how do you look like, what's your academic past, but we are looking for motivation and talent.
Thank you. So, Nolwenn, what would you say is the biggest issue in this landscape today? Can you give us sort of the high level?
Sure. From my point of view,
yes,
is unconscious bias. And we need to move from unconscious bias to conscious inclusiveness. And in the realm of companies, because this is what I practice in my company and in business context, it's all the way that end to end we need to think about removing biases. So it's when you craft your job descriptions, when you're hiring candidates, some of the vocabulary that you use is actually going to be targeting only white men. For example, if you insist on brilliance versus learning capabilities, you'll typically attract only men, because women, they can be brilliant as well, just the same, but they don't relate as, oh, I'm so brilliant, I should apply. So you should remove all the, top-notch ninja, you're the top expert, you should remove all of that from your job descriptions. So just an example. And then, also, it's how you source candidates, right? So you should tell your recruiter, it's not just, okay, I want the best candidate tomorrow, because otherwise you're gonna default to the easiest thing, which is, the white male. You should also have incentives to have diverse candidates, or having metrics and say, hey, I want at least 2 or 3 diverse candidates. If not, I'm not going to hire anyone. And then on the panels as well, the interviewers, they should be diverse. And then on and on and on. And then once people are in the company, they need also to have the same attention. So for promotions, are we looking also at men and women? Doing annual review, are we fair? And usually, there are people at Stanford studying that, and other groups as well. There is a lot of bias even in the performance reviews. Typically, something to remember for you guys here, women are more described with qualities that are assessed as communal. So they are very like a team player, they're collaborative, and men are more like described with agentic vocabulary. They're go-getters, they're leaders, but the vocabulary is really, biased by gender, and you have to ask yourself in the end of the day, who you want to promote? You want to promote a nice person who's collaborative, or you want to try, promote the person who's a go-getter and brought on the table millions of dollars. So it's all the way.
So how many of you know what unconscious bias is? All right, we're doing okay. How many of you have no biases whatsoever that are unconscious? How many of you have taken that IAT test that Harvard's come out with? Excellent. It's actually, they have a ton of different tests you can take. I thought it was kind of fascinating because my whole life is about women and women's leadership, and I actually had some biases there that surprised me. So it's well worth doing and paying attention. And there are like 160 types actually of biases, but 5 have really been identified to be the biggest issues that affect corporate performance. And so, you said, every year we get frustrated because we're like, the women aren't getting paid at the same level. Well, maybe there's some unconscious bias happening because we're human beings, we all have it. So how do you disrupt it consistently in everything that you do, I think is really powerful. All right, so who sets the tone in the company, and what's the ripple effect at the board level if you get the right people?
Sure. I mean, this is where everything, as I say, it starts at the top. And I think it's important that organizations have the diversity represented in the boardroom, because the diverse board members will remind the CEO to say, okay, are we building a diverse pipeline of talent? Do we have the right people coming around? And so we've been working, over the last 2 years, we've been tracking gender diversity every quarter and been mapping that across all public companies. And even today, 20% of boards do not have any women here in the United States. And as many of you know, here in California, the SB 826 just passed, where now there's a law that Jerry Brown signed at the end of September, was it? I guess, right? And right before the term ended there. The point thing here is that 90% of California companies are not in compliance. So, for those women here who are thinking about opportunities, Nicole's will talk more about this later, it's a tremendous opportunity. And so now there is going to be a lot of pressure, not only from at the state level, but also the institutional investor community. So the major shareholders you're going to start to see, State Street, BlackRock, Vanguard, and others, they're going to be voting against board members not supporting the re-election. So getting back to your question earlier, it starts at the top, and I think it's so critical to have that diversity there. And there was actually a great statement I heard about a year ago her name is Michelle Edkins, and I would say she's probably one of the most powerful women in America. So she runs the proxy voting team at BlackRock. And for those, BlackRock right down the street, they manage over $6 trillion of assets. And so for almost every company, including Salesforce, they probably own anywhere from 5 to 10% of the company. The woman's about yo big, but she can strike fear into a lot of people. And she's got a great New Zealand accent along the way. But what she mentioned this whole concept of visible diversity, and I think Alex was talking about this earlier about the competition for talent. And when women and people of color look at boards of companies and they don't see people like them represented, that turns them off. And as you know, as especially here, right, as we're competing for talent, you know, if you're not going to include women or people of color as part, or potentially, alienate them, that takes out a big part of the population.
It sure does. How many people in this room are actually on a corporate board of some type? Okay, just a handful. How many of you have thought about it or even have it on your radar? Everybody raise your hand. Okay, all right, Nicole, so tell us, how do we get on a board? And once we're on a board, what kind of impact can we have in the company culture?
Well, I think you get on a board by first starting with some serious self-assessment. Not everybody gets on a board. I mean, the board leadership is designed to be the top performing executives in the country. Top 3% are in the mix.
For public company board?
For public and private. I mean, there's also a distinct lack of diversity on private company boards, which is another part of it.
Probably more so.
Much more so. 86% are lacking diversity. As far as we're able to track, it's trickier with private companies. So once you have done some serious self-assessment and you have some backup, for the board list, you have to be nominated onto the platform. So unlike LinkedIn, where you just create a profile and wait to be discovered, you actually have to be nominated. It is all about discovery, though, and the board list is simply one avenue. It's one platform for discovery. There are many. You can go through executive search firms. The oldest way in the world is just to contact every board member you know, let them know what you're interested in. And I think what's interesting here about women is that they tend to do a very poor job of that. I mean, I spend all day talking to the most astonishing women executives who have, just done so much, accomplished so much, and still often, much more often than I thought would be the case, I still have to encourage them to go out there and self-promote.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're that good, you gotta self-promote.
All right, how many of you actually have a plan for your own self-promotion, your thought leadership? You guys have, how many of you have more than 3,000 LinkedIn contacts? All right, good. All right. Okay, so when you're training your young people, they don't have to have a bachelor's or a master's already, right?
No, they don't. And maybe
Who was your target market?
Let me start by defining what's diversity for us. So I think there are two types of diversity. There is how you look like, how you are, what's your ethnicity, what's your gender. And then there is the second type of diversity, which is what's your walks of life, right? In which social environment, financial environment you grew up in. And the type of people that we are aiming at is basically people who are underrepresented in the tech industry, so people of color and women. One of the issues with these people is that they don't even want to get into the tech industry because none of their friends or family, are in it, right? And as it was mentioned, you go, in an office, you look at the people around, or you go on a website of a software engineering school, it's all white dude with a beard, basically like me, right? And so we need to inspire the next generation of students to join, to be part of the tech industry, and we need it for many reasons, just for pure business reasons, because as our company are global, if you have only a team of white youth building a product, you will misserve a very large part of your customer bases, or you won't serve them at all. But even as a society, right, as software and now artificial intelligence is dictating so much of our life, right? It's deciding if you will have, how much you pay for your insurance, if you will get healthcare or not, or now police is using facial recognition to identify suspect. Well, guess what? If it's only trained by white people, it doesn't work on people of color, and people are being in jail just because of that. And the software team who built this, it was not, it was unconscious bias, right? So how we are trying to approach this as a school? We go against the society because when we educate our kids, we give a doll to the girl and we give building blocks to the boys. And Or even in ethnicity, like for Caucasian people by 5, kids are exposed to STEM. For the black community is like, high school, perhaps college, right? So we need to inspire this demographic basically that, hey, not only career is a path for you, but we actually need you. Our society is going to be a cluster, right? So the way that we approach that on our side is by working with celebrities, whether tech leaders or celebrities like singer, actress, sport people, who basically have an audience of these underrepresented people in the tech industry. So we are working with Priyanka Chopra, with an actress. We are working with Neo, with a black African American singer. We are working with Kelvin Binshum within the NFL to really inspire people to that tech is a path for them. And then, yeah.
I would like to just say one thing, and this comes from my many years in executive search at Spencer Stuart, one of the big retained search firms, not better than the others, but just as good. When I joined their diversity group there, the practice, it was quickly pointed out to me that diversity is whatever you don't have. So oftentimes in tech, it is obviously women, people of color, women of color, people of color, but it can be whatever you don't have. So I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I mean, so we, Dave and I have had the chance to be part of the CEO group that PricewaterhouseCoopers put together, and we were sort of talking about, what are the different strategies that companies are using to address supposedly the pipeline issue, right? And depending on what you're talking about, it is real, but for the most part, what we know is you don't have to go to MIT in computer engineering to actually be a good computer engineer at a base level. My kids are 22 and 25 and their friends call themselves code monkeys. Like they feel like that anyone could do their job. Yeah, I'm not saying anyone could do your jobs. But I do think that the alternative strategies to training people to get in the pipeline is one of the most important things leaders can do as we think about how we're building our companies. We wanted to give an opportunity for the audience members to ask any questions. So if anyone has questions for these rock star panelists, you can ask a question or I'll keep going. Yes? Yeah.
Hi, so can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So I'm Clara Tyrian, I work in venture capital at Hewlett Packard Ventures. And definitely for me, diversity is very important. So just to give a number, I've been in my new role for a year and I only met with one female CEO, so we have ways to go. And I think as investors and even members of the board, we have a role to play in raising awareness in how CEOs think about their recruiting. And one counter argument I would often get is that it's not a priority when you're starting a company to think about diversity. So I was wondering whether you have any tools to facilitate that aspect and my argument.
Well, while I'm on my way over here, I'm just going to say that the first 30 people set the culture in a company that you then have to undo. Anyone?
I think, everybody wants to move quickly and whatnot, but there's, how many people are familiar with the Rooney Rule? Oh, wow. Okay, so one hand. Okay, so American football, not European football. So there's a family, there's the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers is owned by the Rooney family. And the Rooney Rule was adopted by the NFL in I think roughly 2001. And what happened in 2001 is if you look at NFL football players, right, a very high percentage are African American, right, or Latino, whatnot. But at the time in 2001, two of the African American head coaches, Tony Dungy and Dennis Green, were both fired that year. And so at that point in time, there were no African American coaches in the NFL. When you look at the players, probably at least half or so are of African American descent. And so what the Rooney Rule was with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the NFL, Commissioner Paul Tagliabue adopted a rule so that anytime that there was a vacancy, that they would at least consider one candidate that was a person of color. And I think that startups as you're thinking about building out your businesses, because I think it's part of the culture, it's part of the DNA that you set with the company. It's not saying that you have to hire a person, but at least you consider a person, a diverse candidate as part of the process. And the reason, and so getting back to like what Alex was talking about earlier, okay, why did the Pittsburgh Steelers and others adopt this? There's a business imperative. And if you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers as a football team, for those who follow NFL football, they are by far the most successful NFL franchise in the modern era. They are the only professional sports team where they've had 3 consecutive head coaches that had been a head coach for at least 10 years. If you look at the 49ers, I think they've had 10 in the last, no, other than Jim Harbaugh, right? They've had quite a bit of turnover there. And this was a very important part of the Steelers culture going back to the 1960s. The Rooney family was the first, the Steelers they were the first NFL team to go recruit at the historically black colleges and universities. So this would be, Howard University in Washington, D.C., and Hampton City and others. And so what they were doing is they were drawing from a pool of talent that nobody else was going to. And so that's something that as you're thinking about startups and whatnot, is just as you think about bringing in that diversity as part of it, I think that you'll find over time that those businesses outperform.
And just to add, maybe you can refer them to the McKinsey Why Diversity Matters, because you have all the stats, and so you bet more patents, more better performance, financial performance. So why would you want to have that from the get-go as a startup? I mean, you need to be performant if you want to survive.
Yeah, way less risk. My daughter works at Uber, just saying. Anybody else have a question for the panelists? Yeah.
Talking about diversity, citizenship, male, female, all that. What about the diversity in the city of San Francisco? The tech industry is taking over every single businesses, kicking out everybody out of the city. I am an architect. I design buildings where the tech industry is being housed, and we've been kicked out. And it's not only my company, it's Gensler, the largest company in the world, is being kicked out by Google, has been kicked out by Google. SOM, the most sophisticated architect company in the world, has been kicked out as well. So I would like to know what the tech industry, self-centered, way too much self-centered, is doing about that.
I can take, just one example. I don't have a solution, but I'm part of one of the tech company, PayPal, and we've been partnering with The Atlantic, the magazine, journal, Atlantic, and they had a series to address this problem of diversity and inclusion with mayors, with tech companies in the city, in the Silicon Valley, with schools, because there is a lot of problems as well for teachers now to be in the Bay Area because of the. So I think what was very interesting in this initiative is that we had many players, officials, all of that, to discuss what needed to be in place to move the needle there. It was very interesting for me to see, at least from the conversation I attended, that this couldn't be resolved with just one party, but we really need to work together across the different segments, not just tech, not just the businesses, but really work with elected officials, work with the governors, the senators, all of that, and even pass laws. For example, I think Scott Wiener was mentioning that we needed to reform building more residence versus work offices in some districts that typically it was not handled at the California level, but everyone decided what they could do. And so there are some regions where you cannot build anything else than offices, and there's a housing crisis, and they go somewhere else. And so everything has to be harmonized and organized among actors. That's one thing.
Nicole, you have some to add? But you want to be? Are you going to be the contrarian?
No. I mean, I've been in the Bay Area for many decades, and I've seen the changes in San Francisco, and I've seen the changes in Oakland, and it's terrifying. I mean, we can't sit here in this house and not acknowledge what Mark Benioff is doing right now, trying to do, in engaging the tech community in addressing the homeless issue, which is enormous. I don't know how we get to harmony. I hope we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the livability for families is probably the biggest issue, and I just know David the best. I'm going to point to David again. Well, the two of us have a friend. His name's Lala Long. He runs something called Faces SF, and he is the largest child care provider in the city. They have worked to change legislation so child care providers can be paid better. It's ridiculous still. None of us would want that job. But also sort of get people trained and people who are marginalized and into decent jobs. So you're an important actor in this space, at least creating a pathway for diversity and safety for families in the city. Any other questions? You know, I love that the VC spoke up. The VC. Anybody else who's a VC? Okay. Well, so one of the things we know, at least in terms of gender, is men are asked about their big, exciting future vision and their numbers and their potential, and women are asked, the data is very clear, there's research on this, women are asked about risk management and how they're going to avoid risk by the VCs. So literally, just like the questions that are asked, not to mention, you know, how many times women have to go up to bat versus men. I mean, the percentages are ridiculous. You know, when you look at the charts, you can send me a LinkedIn request if you want to see lots of charts. I have charts.
Yes, I wanted to comment on that architectural question. I think it runs deep to what your panel is doing here, because harmonizing, inclusivity, if you have more women, this issue may have been lessened.
Yes, women are perfect in the solution to everything. Anybody else have a question for the panelists? You know what, I would love to hear, you know, what is your key recommendation to address this issue of diversity, and maybe outside of what you've already mentioned, and sort of this issue of performance in the companies that we're talking about today?
Sure. No, I think just to reiterate what I said earlier, I mean, it starts at the top, having, you know, the diverse viewpoints represented and having people in the room. And I think, you know, you're going to see in this war for talent that the companies that are going to embrace it are going to attract the best people, and they're going to be the survivors in the whole equation.
Nicole?
Yeah, the war for talent's been going on for 25 years. I mean, it never stops. The important thing is not to accept a slate of all white men or all white women. You know, I mean, you really,
or all
you
one
have
type
to,
of any.
the people who are making those decisions, the hiring decisions at the top, they need to insist on diverse slates.
Well, and one of the things we know is when there's diversity on a board, people are paid more equitably within the company in general. Women get stalled out at the director level because they actually get promoted early on because they're such good collaborators, etc. But they get stuck because they don't switch over to the self-promotion, thought leadership. I show up without, I'm not doing the work, I'm being. So that's one of the, no, really truly, everybody, that's what the research said. I'm sort of a nerd. And that if you're Latino, for example, you get stuck at manager level. You know, so super collaborative, everyone wants to work with you, family style early on. Super, you know, challenged as you go up the ladder.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point here. I think there are two things to keep in mind. I think one is, and you mentioned it, I think this earlier, is building your brand. I can't say enough in terms of like, you don't apply to join boards find you. And I think that is so critical that you know, somehow, whether you're publishing or, you know, coming out, speaking at events and things like that, build your brand. The second thing, also critical, is finding good mentors. Is being very conscious of staying in touch with people you've worked with over the years, because you just don't know where they'll end up. They'll end up somewhere, and you just can't call this person up after 20, not keeping in touch with them for 20 years. But finding mentors along the way, be very conscious and thoughtful about that, because these board seats, they don't just kind of, unless you're like Meg Whitman, they don't fall in your lap. And there are a lot of people, frankly, that you have to work for, and that's building your brand and finding those mentors.
And I'll just say I do a handful of corporate board searches, and I was doing one recently and got kick-ass women because everyone's looking for women on their boards when they approach me. The CEO interviewed 2 people. He said, oh my God, they're perfect. One CFO at Toyota. And he was like, wow, I'd really love for them to work for me. So one that was a little frustrating. I was like, they're not going to work for you. They could be your boss very easily. But the other thing is he said, I think I want people who are more high profile. So just to underscore what you said, you have to be Googleable. You have to have a great network. And it is not hard. What did we say? It costs $75,000 for someone to ghostwrite your book for you to follow you around at Forbes or Forbes.com or something. There are a lot of ways you can elevate your brand presence.
So going back to what we should be doing, at least for companies, I would say track your numbers and measure, because what you don't measure, you won't move. So you need to do that. And it works. I've experienced it at PayPal. Our CEO, Dan Schulman, when he came in 2015, had a board that was 0% diverse. Today it's 50% diverse, or 45 plus 45, 46, something like almost 50% diverse. Women, VPs and above are, VPs 37%, director 36%, but all those numbers have gone up, and there is a real intention, there is real politics. You need to have targets, you need to have goals. If not, it won't move. And we have goals for marketing and sales, so why not for diversity, right? So it's not just like every year, let's try to do whatever and it will happen by itself. No, you have goals, you have.
So if my numbers tell me that people are actually stepping out of the company, how do you get women and people of color to actually stay?
You need to engage them. You need to show them that they have a future in this company, that they can be promotable as well, not just men, that we are investing in them, that we're giving them the training that they need to get to the next level. We give them stretch assignments. Typically, only men get stretch assignments and women more the easy work, and so they cannot prove themselves and then they cannot be promoted. So all of that needs to be reflected and really show them that you're investing in them and they have a future. Also, all the good stuff of having flexible hours, and then making sure that when they come back from maternity leave that you give them some space for handling that in your life as well. So all that stuff is important as well.
You are very specific and clear about recommendations. I love it. Okay, what are some tips that you can leave us with?
2 things on my side. It doesn't matter when you start either a company or a team to think about diversity from day 0, because diversity attracts diversity. Right? If you enter in a building or in a team and you see only one type of person and you are underrepresented in this group, you won't want to be the first one, right? So focus on this from the first day. The second thing is that as humans, we all have bias, and it's unconscious bias, right? That's how we grew, from Stone Age and organizing in small groups. That's how we survive, by basically being with people who are like us. And so one thing when we are building the admission process for our school is that how we go about removing human bias. Well, the answer that we came up with is by removing human, right? So the selection process is blind and automated. There is no human picking students. Yeah, so then you need to make sure that what you build is non-biased, right? But ultimately, I think it works, right? We have 35% women, 50% of our students are people of color. The age goes from 18 to 58, and we have people from all walks of life.
Well done.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And so, yeah, it's something that it might be hard to implement for maybe recruiting, but maybe you can do blind interview, right? Maybe you can not look at the name and the age and just look at the skills, or maybe you can give assignments on the type of skills that the person you are looking to recruit should have. ultimately it works for us, and I'm sure we can translate this to other type of funnels.
Thank you. How many of you have a lot of French people, if you're French, in your network? Okay, well, of course you're here tonight, right? Okay, so the data is really clear that we all have, most of our outside of work friends are kind of like us. They might be, like us in terms of our ethnicity, our education level, etc. And so what you just said about, if, a lot of people have to hire that next person really fast. And if you are, you're all one type of person, you're going to find that type of person in your network. It just is the way it is in the United States of America. And so actively finding, like, there's a woman who name's Caritha Coleman. She runs, or is one of the leaders in Black corporate directors, or Patricia Panetta is Latino corporate directors. Like, you find the people who are the big connectors in whatever that ethnic group is, and really actively seek them out if you're serious about this. So, Reza, thanks for having us here tonight. I hope we hit most of the points.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you to the panel. This was very insightful. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come up here and not enjoy the view because you're and speak. So with that said, we're going to reopen the bar and the food. You're welcome to some networking. And thank you again for coming over. Thank you.
Just a little dark. After the wine.